All right, well, my topic, the title of my talk is Institutions plus minus activist groups equals social change. And hopefully it'll be more clear by the end of my talk. But just a little bit of background about this topic. In my research methods class for sociology right now, we're working on our big research proposal. And my group's topic is examining the relationship between activist groups and institutions with regards to anti-sex trafficking efforts. So for my talk here, I decided to just broaden it and examine the relationship between institutions and activist groups when it comes to affecting social change in general. And I hope to answer some questions such as, can institutions change on their own, or can activist groups accomplish social change on their own, or does it have to be a combined effort between the two? So how I'm going to do that is, first I'm going to give a little bit, I'm going to give some definitions about what activist groups and institutions are in general, and then I'm going to talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages that each of them have when it comes to affecting social change, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how social change happens and how each of them plays a role in it, or if both of them do, or if it's necessary for both of them. So, right off the bat, I'll give some definitions of an activist group. I don't think that's spelled right. And these definitions, I should mention, are coming from an article titled Ideologically Motivated Activism, How Activist Groups Influence Corporate Social Change Activities, produced by two professors at the University of Amsterdam. So, an activist group, whatever, according to them, is a stakeholder group that represents a social movement or claims to do so. So, for example, PETA would be an activist group focused on animal rights, or International Justice Mission is an activist group focused on ending human trafficking. So, on the other hand, we have institutions. Try and spell this one right. An institution, according to this article, is a multifaceted, durable social structure made up of symbolic elements, social activities, and material resources. So, for example, the United States, or UWSP, or Walmart. Those are all institutions within society. And each of these have specific advantages and disadvantages when it comes to affecting social change. I'm just going to name one overall advantage and disadvantage for both of them. For activist groups, they are able to have a narrow focus. They're able to focus on just one issue instead of institutions. Their biggest weakness is that they have a broad focus, so they have a lot of things to think about. So the United States has a ton of things that they have to focus on, rather than an institution group or an activist group like PETA can just focus on animal rights. But the biggest disadvantage to activist groups is that they have limited power within society to affect any sort of change. And on the other hand, institutions have a large amount of power. So, based on these advantages and disadvantages, they kind of complement each other. But I want to stop right here, and I'm going to use this board over here to talk a little bit about how social change happens. According to the same article from the University of Amsterdam, there's 5 stages of social change. There's institutionalized, deinstitutionalization, deinstitutionalized state, the reinstitutionalization process, and the reinstitutionalized state. So I know that's a lot of vocabulary that sounds really similar. So I'll diagram it, and it looks something like this, if the marker works. Okay. So think of this as an institution. This is the institutionalized institution, and then when social change begins, the institution gets deinstitutionalized and eventually reaches the state of being deinstitutionalized. And eventually it begins the process of reinstitutionalization, looking a little bit differently, and then finally reaches the reinstitutionalized state. So my question is, how do each of these fit into this process? And I think one of the great things about activist groups is that they can provide moral accountability to institutions. So the process of deinstitutionalization falls usually on the activist groups.
That's,
Really?
go ahead, it's fine.
Keep going.
Okay. Falls on the activist groups. The process of making the changes falls on the institutions. And then the process of reinstitutionalization falls on both. The institutions have the power to make the changes and enforce the changes, and then the activist groups have the power to provide moral support to the changes. So, my point is both activist groups and institutions play a role in it. So with that being established, we can revise our title to Institutions plus Activist Groups equal social change. And that's it.